Possibly the most beautiful girl I've ever met.
In the same interview, Teo talked about learning that his girlfriend, Lene Kakua, had died from leukemia.
The woman he described as the most beautiful girl he'd ever met, the love of his life, never died. She also never lived.
Just ask Manti directly if I had a chance to speak with him. I would just directly ask him, were you involved?
In the Manti Teo documentary, you learned that someone was able to fool not only Manti Teo, but several other people into thinking that they were another person named Lene Kakua. But what if I told you there was something the Manti Teo documentary didn't tell you? Like, for example, how did Teo feel after losing the BCS championship because he underperformed? How was Teo the best linebacker in the nation, becoming a Heisman Trophy finalist, but slipped down NFL draft boards? Did Manti Teo ever actually find love in the real world? Did Teo go on to have a successful NFL career? But most importantly, how did this fake girlfriend hoax that Teo never even knew about in the first place follow him his entire career, and still to this day, why can't he shake it? Break! This video is sponsored by DraftKings. Calling all college football fans. The 2022 season kicks off this week. Whether you're a Tiger, Bruin, Wolverine, or even a Duck, there are plenty ways to cash in this football season. As teams begin their hunt for glory, DraftKings Sportsbook is putting new customers in the center of the action with an opportunity to instantly turn $5 into $200 of free bets. That's right, DraftKings is giving all new customers $200 in free bets when they place any pre-game $5 or more wager on the college football team of their choosing. Plus, with same game parlays, you can combine multiple bets from the same game to give yourself a shot at even bigger winnings all season long. DraftKings has been around for a while, so you know your funds are safe and can be withdrawn whenever, wherever you want. So download the DraftKings Sports app now, and when new customers use my promo code Mikerophone, they'll receive $200 in free bets instantly when they place a $5 wager. That's promo code Mikerophone only at DraftKings Sportsbook. And thank you, DraftKings, for the sponsorship. Everyone knows the Manti Teo girlfriend story. He was catfished online, was too scared to admit that he hadn't met her in person, had his hopes up that she was real, and after his senior season at Notre Dame, it all came crashing down after a private investigator found out his girlfriend wasn't real. Now, you can believe whether or not Teo had any part in this, and honestly, all signs point toward the fact that he was a victim in all of this. But do you know what happened in Teo's final collegiate game? The only game he ever played with everyone in America knowing his secret? Manti Teo, after a season of dominating defensively, had his worst game yet in the BCS National Championship game. He only recorded 10 tackles, which on the surface may seem good, but when you consider this man was a ball hawk over the middle of the field, and he had 7 interceptions, as well as an ungodly amount of pass deflections, his performance was definitely a letdown. The whole game, Teo took awkward angles for tackles, was mauled by Alabama's offensive line, and you'd be lucky if you found one play where he shed a block. In a post-game interview, a reporter asked Teo how he felt about his performance.
I had a lot of opportunities to make some plays, and I did it. And I think the greatest thing is I walked off the field with no regrets. I played as hard as I could. There are a couple plays that I could have done better on, but I walked off the field knowing that, hey, I gave him all.
After the championship game, Teo would declare for the NFL draft. And after the best defensive season in NCAA history since Charles Woodson won the Heisman Trophy in 1997, Manti Teo was all but a lock for the first round. However, that's not what would end up happening. At the NFL Combine, something would happen that flipped Teo's entire NFL projection upside down. And it had nothing to do with Lene Kakua. Everyone, including scouts, was expecting Manti Teo to run anywhere between a low 4.6 40-yard dash to a high 4.7 40-yard dash. However, Teo's time didn't even clock in at 4.6 seconds or below. It didn't even clock in at 4.7 seconds. When the timers were all official, Manti Teo's 40-yard dash time was 4.82 seconds. Absolutely atrocious. For this performance, Teo wouldn't just slip out of the top 10, the mid-first round, or even the late 20s. Manti Teo, who was the consensus best defensive player in the draft just a few short weeks ago, had now dropped all the way down to a projected second-round pick. Teo said he ran slow due to combine stress and actually promised to run faster at his pro day in South Bend. But even if he ran a 4.5 40-yard dash, the damage had already been done. But to add insult to injury, Teo didn't even run much faster at Notre Dame, as he finished his pro day with just a low 4.7 time. And considering the fact that there were no official timers at the pro day, just hand timers, you should definitely take that time with a grain of salt. Because of his lackluster 40-yard dash time and his defensive blow-up in the national championship game, Manti would fall all the way down to the second round, but not too far, as he was the 6th overall selection in the second round to the San Diego Chargers. The minute Manti Teo stepped foot in San Diego, the fan base loved him. However, although the fan base loved him, the writers on the other hand simply saw Teo as a catchy headline. And if you saw the way the journalists talked about him, you'd expect Teo to be a felon, not a victim of some catfishing debacle. But every time a reporter asked him about how he expected to be treated in the NFL, Manti Teo, being the calm, humble young man that he was, always answered gracefully.
I think after the couple months that I've been through, I think I'm pretty prepared. I think as far as going into another stadium, you can't worry about that stuff. You're with your family, you're with your brothers out there, and that's all that matters. That's all you can really pay attention to. It's a football game.
However, as much of an upstanding, great, humble person Manti Teo is, sometimes luck just doesn't go your way. In the Chargers' first preseason game, Manti Teo would suffer a foot injury just 9 snaps in, which caused the rookie to miss the first 3 games of his debut season, and also sparked a problem which would follow him, not just until the end of the season, but for the rest of his career. In Teo's debut against the Dallas Cowboys, he notched 3 total tackles, however only played 24% of all defensive snaps that game. Why? Because the truth is that the foot injury Teo had suffered in preseason normally can keep players out for up to a year. When you consider that and then take into account the very next game against the Raiders that Teo started, it became abundantly clear as just to how tough Manti Teo really is. In that game, Teo recorded 5 tackles, 2 of them being solo tackles. Over the course of the year, Teo would finally get his spot in the starting lineup as he recovered from his injury, but his big breakout game came against the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 12. The Chiefs and Chargers were in a shootout that the Chargers eventually won 41-38, but there is no denying that they would have lost that game without rookie Manti Teo. In that game, Teo might have only recorded 3 tackles, but he had 2 tackles for loss and a pass deflected as he helped the Chargers win the ball game. The Chargers would finish 9-7 that season, but Manti Teo ended up finishing with 61 total tackles, 41 being solo, 4 pass deflections, and 6 tackles for a loss. Not good, but also not bad. So looking towards his second season, Manti Teo was looking forward to breaking out. However, just a few games into Teo's sophomore year, everything would change. After a 22-10 victory over the Buffalo Bills in Week 3, Manti Teo would be diagnosed with a broken foot, the same exact foot which had held him back in 2013. And in case you think that this is the last time you hear about Teo's injured foot, you're in for a rude awakening. Most players would take the time to rehab their foot, miss the season, and come back 100% healthy for the next season, but not Manti Teo. You're starting to sense a theme over here, right? Teo didn't do this because he was afraid of losing his job, or even because the Charger staff pushed him to come back early. Manti Teo did this because he wanted to be on the field with his teammates, his brothers as he calls them. After missing just 6 weeks, Manti Teo was ready to return and help the Chargers on a potential playoff run that he knew they would need his help on. In the last 7 games of the season, Manti Teo played his way into the starting lineup and ended up finishing the season with his first career interception versus Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Unfortunately, however, the Chargers once again finished 9-7 to miss the playoffs, as Manti Teo finished the season with just 10 games played, however still racked up an interception, 3 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections, a sack, 60 combined tackles, 39 of them being solo. As 2015 began, most people had written off Manti Teo as a draft bust, not because he wasn't talented enough, but because he simply wasn't playing enough. However, by the start of 2015, Manti Teo flipped the script entirely. By week 1, Manti Teo was playing basically every defensive snap, and by week 3, Teo had established himself as a star on the Chargers defense. In week 4 against the Cleveland Browns, Teo looked like he was back at Notre Dame as he racked up 13 total tackles, all 13 being solo, and also had 2 tackles for loss. Manti Teo had finally arrived. But remember that foot injury all the way back from the 2013 preseason? Well, it might not have been a broken bone, but in the same foot, Manti Te'o had aggravated his Achilles in a game against the Steelers, and as a result, he had to miss the next 3 games. Te'o returned against the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 11, but also saw limited action. However, Te'o finally got his starting job back against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 12, as he recorded 6 total tackles, 4 being solo, a pass deflection, and also the second interception of his young career. Te'o finished his breakout season playing less games than his rookie year. However, he still recorded 83 tackles, 63 being solo, 4 tackles for a loss, 3 QB hits, a forced fumble, and of course, an interception. However, just as Manti Te'o's NFL career was peaking, it was all about to hurtle down a cliff, as Te'o is still recovering to this day. To start the 2016 NFL season, Manti Te'o absolutely balled out against the Kansas City Chiefs. In Week 1, he recorded double-digit tackles, 8 being solo, 2 tackles for a loss, and he played literally 99% of all of the defensive snaps that game. Honestly, Te'o seemed like a Pro Bowl caliber player at the start of 2016, but just as things were starting to look up, tragedy struck, because in Week 3, Manti Te'o would suffer the worst injury any athlete could ever endure, a torn Achilles. And you guessed it, it was in the same exact foot that all the prior injuries were on. This would cause Te'o to be placed on the IR, and eventually he would miss the rest of the season, meaning of the possible 64 regular season games that Te'o could have played in since he was drafted, he played in just 38. Te'o finished the regular season playing in just 2.5 games, recording just 17 total tackles, 11 being solo, and 2 tackles for a loss. After the season, the Chargers wouldn't extend Manti Te'o, instead opting to let him walk in free agency. However, Manti Te'o was about to turn around his career in a move that no one saw coming. Not even Manti Te'o himself knew what he was about to do. As a free agent, Manti Te'o decided to sign a 2-year contract with the New Orleans Saints, and he was expected to just be a depth linebacker. Nothing more, nothing less. Seeing as the New Orleans Saints 2017 linebacking core consisted of AJ Klein, Craig Robertson, Stephon Anthony, Darnell Ellerbe, and Hauili Kaka, there probably wasn't much room for him anyway, so he had to contribute whenever he had the chance. Through the first 8 games of the season, Manti Te'o played less than 30% of all defensive snaps. He was the depth linebacker he was signed to be, but as the season progressed, he started to play more and more, and by Week 10, Manti Te'o had earned the starting linebacker role for the New Orleans Saints. In Week 14, against the Atlanta Falcons, Te'o proved why he should be the full-time starter, as he recorded 2 tackles for a loss, double-digit tackles, 8 of them being solo. However, it wasn't enough to beat the Atlanta Falcons, as the New Orleans Saints lost 17-20. But still, with the help of newfound starting linebacker Manti Te'o, the Saints had finished 11-5, the best record of Te'o's career, and had earned themselves a trip to the playoffs. In the Saints wildcard round, they were able to defeat the Carolina Panthers 31-26, as Te'o recorded 5 tackles and a tackle for a loss. In the next divisional matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings, Te'o and the Saints wouldn't be as lucky, as the game ended on a controversial non-offensive pass interference call on Kyle Rudolph. Te'o still played solid, however, recording double-digit tackles once again, 6 being solo, a QB hit, and even recorded the first sack of his career. And everything seemed to be going perfectly for Manti at this point. In the 2017 season, he absolutely balled out, having 3 pass deflections, 6 total tackles, 42 solo tackles, and even led the Saints in tackles for a loss, as he had 7 that season. He had finally found a new team that he earned the starting job for. He seemed to be getting better and better as time went on, and as for his torn Achilles back in 2016, well, that was old news. And going into 2018, Manti Te'o, at the ripe age of 27 years old, was ready to have his best season to date, but not if Demario Davis had anything to say about it. And this is where things started to go south for Manti. At the start of the 2018 NFL offseason, the New Orleans Saints signed free agent interior linebacker Demario Davis to a 3-year contract worth nearly $30 million. Cool, good for Davis, but what does that exactly have to do with Manti Te'o? Well, in case you're unaware, Manti plays the exact same position as Demario Davis. This wouldn't mean much considering most teams have multiple interior linebackers, but seeing as the Saints were high on veteran linebacker AJ Klein among others, where exactly exactly does Teo fit into the Saints defense? Well, the tough answer is on the sidelines. That's right, Manti Teo was healthy the entire 2018 NFL season, but was a healthy scratch for 11 games that season, meaning he played in just 5 games, starting just 2, and that season in just 141 total defensive snaps, Manti Teo recorded a career low 18 tackles, 12 solo tackles, and just 1 pass deflected. Teo wouldn't re-sign with the New Orleans Saints for 2019. In fact, at this point, no team would sign Manti Teo, as he went unsigned as the 2019 season began. But as time went on, more and more linebackers kept getting placed on the IR, so with the Saints in a war of attrition with the rest of the NFL, they decided to sign Manti Teo at the end of the 2019 season to help the franchise make a late playoff push. And honestly, if you think about it, it was a perfect fit. The Saints needed able bodies. Teo was fresh and ready to go since he hadn't played all season, and he already knows the entire defensive playbook. But the truth is, even in his limited return, after the Saints saw how he performed in the final weeks of the season, Teo would once again be a healthy scratch in the playoffs. In just 2 games played that season off the bench, Manti Teo saw his last NFL regular season action, recording just 6 total tackles as well as a single QB hit. But just because he saw his last regular season action doesn't mean Teo's career is over just yet. As the 2020 NFL season started, Manti Teo wasn't on an NFL roster. But as the season continued into late October, some teams were looking for some mid-season reinforcements. And one of those teams were the Chicago Bears. Manti Teo would sign a contract with the Chicago Bears, but not to start, not even to play as a depth piece, but to play on the practice squad. No shade at Teo whatsoever, but in 2012, if you saw him tearing apart Big Ten offenses the way he did, at the time, it would have been pretty hard to imagine him as a practice squad player. But nonetheless, Teo played for the Chicago Bears practice squad, and he must have played pretty damn well, because in a shocking twist of events, as the Bears made the playoffs, they also elevated Manti Teo to the active roster. That's right, after weeks of toiling on the practice squad in negative degree weather in Chicago, Manti Teo had earned a spot on the roster, but this time it was in the playoffs. But it wasn't just any old playoff game either. It was against his former team, the New Orleans Saints. Teo and the defense held up their end of the bargain as they allowed just 21 points to Drew Brees and the Saints. Teo recorded 6 tackles, all 6 being solo, but despite allowing just 21 points, the Bears offense, led by future MVP Mitch Trubisky, put up an astounding 9 points. After the season, Manti Teo wouldn't re-sign with the Chicago Bears, and in fact, didn't play at all during the 2021 campaign. So that begs the question, where is Manti Teo now? Does he actually have a real girlfriend now? Does he ever intend on making an NFL comeback? And most importantly, what exactly is Manti Teo's football legacy? After his NFL career, Manti Teo has been keeping a pretty low profile publicly. That is, everywhere except Instagram. Today you can find Teo posting frequently on Instagram, where it appears he spends most of his time with his family. That includes, and I know you've been waiting to hear this, a real girlfriend. That's right, Manti Teo actually has a wife and child now, and it looks like thanks to football, he'll be able to live the rest of his life comfortably with them. Along with his family, it appears that Teo also owns some sort of long-haul trucking business, as he isn't afraid to post the new trucks his company has added to the fleet. I think it's safe to say that Teo won't be one of those athletes that goes broke anytime soon. He seems to have invested his money very wisely, which is really nice to see, because throughout his entire career, Manti Teo made $10 million. And that's more than enough money to set yourself up for life if you invest that capital properly. And it seems like Manti Teo did just that. As for a potential NFL comeback, never say never, because Manti Teo still keeps himself in playing shape, as evidenced by his posts on Instagram, where it appears that he's putting in a lot of work. But if this ends up being the last we see of Manti Teo, the Notre Dame legend, what exactly is his legacy? Well, if you really want to be a hater, you could simply say he was a draft bust. That's not the whole story. The truth is, up until his Achilles tear with the San Diego Chargers, the dude was an above average player, maybe even a Pro Bowler. In fact, if he hadn't torn his Achilles in 2016 and missed the rest of the season, I doubt Teo is out of the NFL right now. Considering that he was able to stay in the NFL for the duration that he was able to, which was 8 seasons, including an Achilles tear, that's still incredibly impressive. When you see him in interviews as well, it seems like he didn't take too many shots to the head and his brain is still intact, which above all else I think is incredibly important. Maybe God was doing him a favor by giving him this injury. In my opinion, Manti Teo is still a football legend, just not in the NFL. In college, Manti Teo was an absolute monster. I mean, he literally had the best defensive season since Charles Woodson in the 90s. I'm not exaggerating whatsoever. The guy was a linebacker who could cover from one sideline to the other, and if you thought you could run the ball on his watch, you better think again. I honestly only think it's a matter of time until he's inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. For all all of his greatness and even his flaws, Manti Te'o was a solid NFL player. It's not like he was one of those colossal busts that succeeded in college football but failed in the NFL. It's not like he was Matt Leinart or Johnny Manziel or Brady Quinn. No disrespect to those guys, but he played 8 seasons in the NFL and made $10 million. So to summarize, Manti Te'o was a solid NFL player and an even better college football player whose career was unfortunately shortened due to an Achilles tear. Had it not been for the Achilles tear though, there's just no telling how dominant Manti Te'o could have been. In fact, if he hadn't gotten hurt, where do you think he could have been ranked all time? Same as now? Or do you think Manti Te'o could have been one of the best linebackers in NFL history? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.